Hello, everybody. Bob Oxley here, and it's time for tips, topics, issues, and positions. And today's the topic is going to be taking a look at the midterm elections, both from a national standpoint and something closer to home here in the state of Utah. And it's my pleasure to once again, I've asked my expert here at Dixie State University, Professor Joe Green, to come in from the Political Science and History Department here at Dixie State, to offer his impressions as to the outcomes, results, and some things are still pending. So welcome, Professor Green.
Thanks for having me again, Bob.
Yeah, you're back. You're getting used to the pathway between McDonald Building and the Jennings Communication Center, aren't you?
You could just get the funding, and I'd be a permanent guest, Bob.
We'll work on that, too. Listen, we've had a very interesting election last Tuesday, and the blue wave in some respects didn't materialize as the Democrats claimed. I think there was a lot of response on the part of the voters out there that the polarization was really illuminated. People really saw that there really is a deep split between the feelings on Republicans, the GOP, as well as with Democrats. Just to start off a little bit from an overview right now, this is what I've got as of about 30 minutes ago. Apparently, the U.S. House, the Democrats have 225 seats to the Republican 197 seats. And
it's estimated, because there's some not decided yet,
right.
But if things go the way they are, the Democrats will have about 230, I think.
Yeah, I've got the last thing I picked up was there were still 13 houses yet to be called because they're too close. Mm-hmm. And of the 13, I've got 5 Democrats are currently leading and 8 Republicans are currently leading in their House races. So we're not done. We're gonna talk around these things because there's so many races nationally. There's been challenges that have taken place over the last 48 hours. So we're just going to have this as an open forum concerning the midterm elections. So just based on, just from a generalization standpoint, just make the assumption that the Democrats have taken over the U.S. House.
Yeah, they have.
And the Republican Party has retained control of the Senate. Mm-hmm. And President Trump is happy and unhappy, but he's really pushing for the Senate. And he said, well, great, we've got the Senate, so if I have an opportunity to put another conservative judge in the Supreme Court, I can do so now. So based on just your feeling and your preliminary analysis overview of the new, starting January, the new look as far as Congress and the presidency is concerned, what can we anticipate? What do you think is going to happen?
There'll be gridlock, which probably is what the median voter in the country was looking for. The country is a center-right country, but out in the rural areas where President Trump does really well, that's why they picked up the 4 Senate seats that they did. The issues that Mr. Trump emphasizes, like immigration, are really popular. They're not as popular in the suburbs. The cities are Democratic strongholds in the country. We're divided geographically. The rural areas are Republican, and the big cities are vote Democratic by big margins. So that these are fought out in the suburbs. Okay, and there tend to be a larger group of women in the suburbs than men in the electorate, and so that's kind of who you try to compete for. And the suburbs tend to be a little bit more moderate than you find in the cities or out in the countryside. So this time the moderates kind of went in those suburbs went to the Democrats, but they went to moderate Democrats. That's hard for people in Utah to imagine that such a thing as a moderate Democrat exists. Okay, but even Utah, Mr. McAdams, it looks like he'll win up in the 4th District from former mayor of Salt Lake is going to be a moderate. So there's going to be a moderate set of Democrats in the House, and so they're going to emphasize Democratic issues like having the government be more involved in health care.
Yes.
Will be a big one, but it's not going to be any kind of a single payer. They're not going to be able to push that through the way that the left side of the Democratic Party wants to do. It'll be, but whatever the Democrats propose, the Republican Senate won't pass, and whatever the Republican Senate passes, the House won't. So we're going to have trouble getting budgets. The Democrats are going to want tax increases for various programs. They don't think the tax bill is the great, wonderful thing that President Trump and the Republicans think it is, and so they're going to want to raise taxes, maybe on the higher levels of incomes. Mr. Trump indicated he might be open to that if he's not investigated, but the various chairmen of the House committees tend to be on the way left liberal bloc of the Democratic Party, and they want to investigate Republicans. So they're going after his tax returns. They're going to look more closely than the Republicans did at the claim of Russian collusion. So there'll be lots and lots of investigations, and Mr. Trump's going to get really angry, and he probably won't want to work with them for much. He'll probably use them as a foil. Look at kind of like Harry Truman did back in the 1948 election, where he called them the Do-Nothing Congress, and he'll call them the Do-Nothing House. Or
if he's kind, he'll say that.
Yes, he'll certainly have something to tweet every morning about how bad they are and dishonest, and
along with the journalist.
Yeah.
Okay, the media.
But it looks like that his general demeanor is very unpopular with the vote, with the marginal vote, the average voter, the median voter in the suburbs, and that his position on immigration seems to be too extreme for them. They would like to see the Dreamers, we can talk about that if you want, the Dreamers turned into citizens, and in return for some sort of border security system. But so far the parties have been more than willing to use this as a wedge issue and not solve the problem, rather than I'm not sure they can solve it, but not passing a piece of legislation where they say they solved it. They'd rather not do that. They'd rather blame each other for the deficiencies of the immigration system.
It's kind of disappointing, whereby you have analyzed it, and I agree with you, that it's going to be gridlock again for at least another 2 years. Nothing's going to get done. There's going to be a lot of proposals and attempted maneuvering on both sides that's going to end up nowhere.
Yeah, they've got a debt ceiling, which always happens. The Congress always puts a ceiling on the debt, and the government can't borrow any money to pay for ongoing programs, which it's committed to pay for, without raising the debt ceiling. So if it is Mrs. Pelosi as the speaker, she'll use that, and the necessity to get a budget to fund the military or to fund this program, or they'll use that as a way of trying to force Republicans to do things Republicans don't want to do, and the Republicans will do the same thing, try to force the Democrats to do things they don't want to do, and they've got to raise the debt ceiling, because otherwise we default on our debt, because we've committed to pay for stuff. Maybe it was a good idea to commit to it, maybe it wasn't, but we've committed to pay for it. The checks are going out, and so if the money isn't there, we default, and we've never defaulted before as a country. So that'll be the sort of Damocles hanging over their heads, and they'll probably yell at each other a lot about it.
I'm sure they will, through a number of things. So from a national standpoint, our Congress, along with the president, we've got gridlock, so nothing's going to really happen alarming. I've got a couple of things here, a couple of Senate races just for an update and see their significance. I'm looking at Arizona, which is just south of us here, and I'm showing that Kirsten, is it Sinema, as she's currently leading by 9,600 votes over Martha McSally.
Mm-hmm.
And but we still have 345,000 votes that have been uncounted. This is as of 2 hours ago.
Yeah, and everything looks right now like there'll be a recount in that race. So we're not going to know who won that for
That's
a long.
going to be my question.
Yeah,
we're not going to know for a long time.
We're a long way out to know who won that.
Well, let me jump from Arizona way over there on the east side to Florida. I've got a similar situation there between Bill Nelson and Rick Scott. I mean, it's less than 3% differential in votes right now. And Nelson currently has a little bit of the lead, but not much. That's as of 2 hours ago. They still have a lot of uncounted votes there.
Yeah.
And is there anything going on? I tried to find out something about any legal maneuvering going on. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. I think Bill Nelson filed a suit over how the counting's going.
Okay.
I think Governor Scott counterfiled suit this morning,
Okay.
according to the headline, at least, that I saw.
Okay.
The Republicans are charging that the southern counties down by Miami, Palm Beach, and especially Broward County, don't always count, do their vote count above board. The Republicans are claiming that there might be voter fraud of some kind going on. I don't think they have much evidence for it. But I heard Senator Rubio last night. He says every time this happens, Broward always comes in late. All the other counties, even the ones hit by hurricanes, get their votes in on time.
The Panhandle was in. I heard that also.
Yeah, Broward's always way behind. So there's going to be a lot of name calling about the Broward County tends to be heavily Democratically run, but this will be recounted. The Florida governor's race was actually called on election night, but that now evidently will be recounted.
I heard something along that line. Also, there's legal challenges going in as far as voter suppression in Georgia. I heard that's alive again.
Yes,
so, that's this morning. That's just I'm picking up news like you are.
Yeah, it's a really close election, and the Republican candidate was the Secretary of State before,
he was,
or whatever it was he was.
He was
He's the guy supervising the elections.
That's exactly.
And he's running in the election.
Absolutely. He oversaw the election process.
And so clearly the lawyers are going to get into that because just because of the way it looks. And maybe some people were prevented from voting. Who knows? But,
well, they had that. It had to be exactly right law there in Georgia. So even if you filled out your registration form correctly and it was inputted incorrectly by someone in the government, that automatically then disallowed you to vote.
Yeah. Well, they will challenge it because everyone's vote ought to count. That's just an American value. And so the lawyers who are charging $1,200 an hour are about to get even richer than they used to be over the next little while.
That's true. And again, you got those that lean toward the Republican Party and those attorneys, those staffs that lean toward the Democrat, and they're just licking their chops saying, oh, boy, we're going to make a windfall on this one.
Yeah, it's
going to be nasty.
Yep.
I've got some other just general information here. Let's take it from the Congress down to the states themselves. Here's what I'm showing. Here's some headlines that I've seen that the Democrats have won 9 states, of which 7 governorships. 7 governorships have flipped.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on top of that, they said that there's 6 state legislatures, Senate and House, 300 state House and Senate seats have changed, and those states that have had this flip and the legislators change are Maine, Connecticut, Colorado, Illinois, Nevada, which is a neighbor, and New Mexico. So let me ask you a question. Historically, isn't this what happened 8 years ago with the Republicans taking over governorships? And by getting the governorships and the state legislatures, they have a lot more control than people give them credit for.
Yeah, the Republicans in 2010 flipped 900 legislative seats and a bunch of governorships. And in 2016, they had 36 of the 50 governorships.
Wow.
And that, when you control the legislature and the governor, then when we have a census every 10 years,
Yes.
and the population changes, the boundaries of the House districts in states that lost seats and the states that gained seats have to be redrawn.
Oh.
And they're always drawn by the majority party with the help of the governor, if the governor will sign on to the bill, in ways that help the majority party
Well, there you go.
gain seats.
Okay.
So right now we know that if you take all the people who vote Democratic in Texas compared to all the people who vote Republican in Texas, that just based on that number, there should be 4 more Democratic congressmen in Texas than there are. At least this last election, I'm not exactly sure. And that's because the Republican legislature drew the districts in such a way that you minimize the number of Democrats in a certain district based on the voting in the precincts, and you maximize the number of Republicans, and you can create the districts in such a way that you increase the probability of your party winning that particular district.
Got it.
We call that gerrymandering.
I was going to say, is this
Yes.
gerrymandering at its best?
Yeah, and the Republicans do it in Texas, and the Democrats do it in California, although they created a commission in California, but it had a majority of Democrats on it, and the commission pretty much gerrymandered the districts again. So
that really does explain why there's some statements made that with the Democrats flipping not only the governorship but the state legislators, they have like carte blanche power, and gerrymandering is one of the key ways to retain that control.
Now, the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania this summer just decided it was going to redistrict because it didn't like the way the Republican legislature had redistricted Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So they redistricted by court order, and the Supreme Court refused. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear the appeal on this, and so they gerrymandered it so that the Democrats had the advantage in Pennsylvania. It was the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania is loaded with Democratic judges.
Got it.
So and as a result, Pennsylvania, which went for Trump, there were very few Republicans who escaped there. It was a Democratic sweep. That's where the biggest Democratic pickups were.
Wow. I've got some other issues other than gerrymandering. Some of the core issues, state by state, health care is going to be one of those core issues that's going to be looked at nationally, but I guess the state of Maine is really looking at Medicaid expansion and, like you said, not necessarily universal health care, but taking the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid and expanding on that. What?
Even Utah did that.
Okay.
Which you would, back 20 years ago, would never have happened. That would look like a big government program and so on. People are concerned about their health care. They worry that if they get some sort of disease that requires hospitalization and lots of treatment, that it can bankrupt them, as you know.
And it does.
And so the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare is what it's normally called. I'm going to call it the Affordable Care Act, required insurance companies to cover pre-existing conditions so that if you've been sick and you need insurance, that you'll be covered. The insurance company cannot say, I'm not going to cover you. That's very costly. It's a real costly part of the Affordable Care Act and required, in order to make it work, subsidies. Okay.
Okay.
And one of the ways that one of the mechanisms for getting the subsidies was for a state to expand Medicaid. Okay. And that's what some of the states didn't do that. If they did it, if they took the Medicaid expansion, then they got subsidies to help people buy their health insurance, to help finance making sure everybody stays on, can't be kicked off their insurance. It's part of what it's there. When the Republicans tried to repeal and replace Obamacare, the first thing they had to do was repeal it. So they had a law that repealed it, which meant they repealed the guarantee of insurance companies will cover pre-existing conditions.
There you go.
Now, Senator McCain voted no, so it failed to pass by one vote, but that allowed the Democrats to say you voted to get rid of coverage for pre-existing conditions, because every Republican who voted to repeal had voted to repeal the whole thing, including pre-existing conditions. Now, the Republicans say, well, if we'd repealed it, we would have replaced it with something that maintained, but that bill didn't ever come up because the Affordable Care Act was never repealed. So,
wow.
During its time under President Obama, it never had popularity above 50%. Now it's been in place since 2014 when people have been signing up. Now it's above 50% of popularity.
Yes, it is.
So it's now a sacred cow, and no one's going to get rid of it. They're going to have to fix it. There's lots of problems with it.
Yes, there is.
And especially how to pay for it, because the primary payment mechanism, a mandate that was in Obamacare, was repealed. By the Republicans, they repealed that part of it. So health care is an issue, and the Democrats were way, way, way more trusted on that issue than Republicans now. So that was the main reason that in those moderate places that the Democrats won, and they're going to want to do something, and Republicans probably are going to compromise on that because they don't want to be seen as not doing something on
Got it. Another core issue is taxes, and the state of Kansas is involved with that, where the taxation, Democrats are now involved with taxation, have some controls over that now. They're going to make some inroads on taxes. Have you heard anything about the taxation in Kansas?
Yeah, that turned into quite an issue.
It did.
Because Senator Brownback left the Senate and became the governor, very conservative guy, and he and the legislature initiated a great big tax cut. And it turns out that they didn't make up the revenue in economic growth as he had promised, so they had big deficits, and it meant they had problems paying for various kind of state programs. And so the Republicans kind of didn't look as Kansas is generally a red state.
Yes, it is.
But that issue was effectively used by the Democratic gubernatorial. I didn't hear. Did they take the legislature in Kansas?
I'm not sure about that. If they had both the Senate and the House,
but they flipped the governorship.
They did,
which really surprised me.
And they gained some seats, but I'm not sure they actually are in control of either of those two houses.
So they're probably going to rescind some of those of Governor Brownback's tax cuts.
I've got another one here, just on states. This is close to home. As far as climate change is concerned, because we're looking at Democrats taking over, that they said from a climate change standpoint, Colorado's going to lead the way as far as introducing new legislation that would be to take controls and try to gain back climate change and be an issues that are make them more aware of, and implement their population to take steps to help on the climate change situation.
Yeah, they had a kind of climate change or energy-related initiative that would have really restricted fracking in Colorado, and it failed. And there were other climate initiatives. I think there was one in Washington. Pretty much all of those failed. The public doesn't seem to be as in tune to that issue.
They don't understand earthquakes in Oklahoma. Eh?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not sure that's a winning issue for Democrats. It's people are concerned about the environment, but they don't want to see the economic growth in their states and their opportunities diminished. And a lot of times the initiatives would really cut into the ability of the economy to have jobs. They tend to be kind of extreme initiatives. So we'll see what Colorado can get away with.
I'm just like I said, I'm picking the information up like you are. This is still like everything's floating. Wisconsin was another state. Just for listeners' attention, is that we knew Wisconsin now has a Democratic governor, but the houses, the state legislature is still Republican. So you talk about gridlock on a state level. I guess Wisconsin's going to have a heck of a time trying to get things through there.
Yeah. Scott Walker initiated a kind of a revolution in Wisconsin. Wisconsin was the original state that experimented with progressive legislation back in the early 1900s. It was the leading government can plan stuff and can regulate business and all of that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And he passed. He and the legislature initiated laws that made it so that if you didn't have to join a union in order to be a public employee. And the union membership has fallen, and the unions have been after Mr. Walker since then. They even got a recall election against him. He lost this time, but if the Republicans maintain the legislature, then they're not going to be able to rescind those labor rules, and they'll stay in place. Michigan did the same thing.
Yes, they did.
Under Governor Snyder.
Right.
And did Michigan legislature?
No, they did not. So it's going to be a Republican legislature along with a Democratic governor.
Those rules that help the unions stay alive have been rescinded in those two states primarily, and it's not going to change.
It's going to be interesting. Let me bring it on home. We have District 4 up there. What's the latest information you've got on that? I know it's too close to call.
I looked at it this morning, and I thought they were going to make an announcement today sometime. I think the mayor is ahead, and I expect that he'll win because it's a 5,000 vote margin of the people who voted in all of that. But I don't know. There's the counting is the counting, and they'll figure it out. There's usually not claims of fraud in Utah elections. We're a pretty well-run state. So.
Yeah. Let's bring it closer, even closer to home. How about Jon Stewart's victory, retaining his seat, going for his third term as a representative? My look at these numbers, in my mind, I always think from a Democratic standpoint in the Washington County area, 28% for Democrats, and the rest are all Republican. And it was a pretty close race. It was 52 or 53 to 47, 48%. I thought that was remarkable for this section of Utah. Do you think that might be a trend for the future, or is it because of the diverse population moving in? Or
I have no idea.
Yeah,
what's happening, but I don't. 10 years ago, Washington County was the 8th most Republican voting district in the country.
Yes. And so I talking to Democrats that they told me years ago, just to anticipate, no matter what the climate is, the political climate is, that for Washington County it's going to be 28% for the Democrats.
Yeah.
And this was just remarkable. I know there was a lot of door-to-door, a good organization put together on the part of the Democrats, a lot of money involved. I understand that the support for the Democratic candidate was from unions, but mostly from little donations from the public as compared to Jon Stewart with some organizations. getting funds donated to his war chest.
Yeah.
So,
So I'm speculating now. I had not heard that Stewart it was that close with Stewart.
yeah.
So you surprised me with that. I probably should have known that. Given his district, it probably had to be here in Washington County that the Democrats made inroads.
I think that's what I read.
We're the one growing because Iron County's not going to change, and the rural counties up north aren't going to change. No. We're the change agent county in Utah. So, but we'll have to wait and see some analysis from somebody and
I know.
see what happened.
Lots went on last Tuesday. We're not done yet.
It was
as
fun.
we discussed. So we've
fun.
taken it from the national down to took a look at some of the states and brought it on home to Utah. Unfortunately, Professor Green, we're out of time again.
It was great being here.
Well,
again,
this
Bob.
time flies by, and I kept it going. I just got the high sign from the technician, said that, roll it. Time to wrap this one up. So
Okay.
I want to say to you one more time, as usual, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to coming over and adding your ideas and your understanding of the way this midterm election turned out. And like I say, it's an ongoing target because we have a lot of races that are still up in the air. That's how close. And it wasn't just here in the state of Utah, nor was it just neighboring states here in the Southwest, but it was nationwide. Pretty exciting time. And what it did was it illustrated the polarization that's taken place between the more conservative and the Democratic more liberal orientation and moderates and how they played into this. But I appreciate your time and effort once again for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes another show of tips, topics, issues, and positions. You can listen to this show every Friday at 3 p.m. on KDXI 100.3 and rebroadcasted on Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Also, we're available on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, as well as our podcast affiliate, Podbean. Until next week, this is Bob Oxley and Professor Joe Green saying goodbye and have a great week. Bye now.